Hello everyone, my name is Abhi Bhardwaj and I'm back with lecture series on science. In today's lecture we are going to explore a very famous scientist. His name is Albert Einstein. We are going to explore his life and what he is known for. So let's get started. He is considered to be the greatest scientist of not only 20th century but all times. Albert Einstein revolutionized the scientific thought with new theories of space, time, mass, motion and gravitation. For instance, Einstein's theory of the special and general relativity drastically altered our view of the universe, and his work in particle and energy theory helped make possible quantum mechanics and ultimately the atomic bomb. Let's talk about his early life. Albert Einstein was born in Ulm, Germany in 1879. Einstein grew up in Munich. Einstein's parents were middle-class Jews. His father was Hermann Einstein and he was originally a feather-bed salesman and later ran his own electrochemical factory. His mother's name was Pauline Koch. In his early life, Einstein once wrote that he had two wonders which deeply affected his early years. The first was his encounter with the compass at age of 5. He was mystified that how can invisible forces could deflect the needle of a compass. This would lead him to a lifelong fascination with invisible forces, which he worked in later years. The second wonder came at age 12 when he discovered a book of geometry which he devoured, calling it his sacred little geometry book. Few people know that Einstein actually became deeply religious at age 12. Even he composed several songs in praise of God and chanting religious songs on the way to school. This began to change, however, after he read science books that contradicted his religious beliefs. Yet another important influence on Einstein was a young medical student, Max Talmud, who often had dinner at the Einstein's home. Talmud became informal tutor of Einstein and he introduced him to higher mathematics and philosophy. A turning point occurred when Einstein was actually 16. Talmud had earlier introduced him to a children's science series by Aaron Weinstein in which the author imagined riding alongside electricity that was traveling inside a telegraph wire. Einstein then asked a question to himself which would dominate for the next 10 years. What would light beam look like if you could run alongside it? That's what Einstein imagined. If light were a wave, then light beam should appear stationary like a frozen wave. Even as a child, though he knew that stationary light waves had never been seen, so there was a paradox, Einstein also wrote The Investigation of Status of Ether in Magnetic Fields. After childhood in Germany and then in Italy, Einstein studied physics and mathematics at Federal Polytechnic Academy in Zurich, Switzerland. He became a Swiss citizen and in 1905 was awarded PhD from University of Zurich while working at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. That year, which historians of Einstein's career call the miracle year, he published 5 theoretical papers that were to have a profound effect on the development of modern physics. The first paper was titled On a Heuristic Viewpoint Concerning the Production and Transformation of Light. Einstein theorized that light is made up of individual quanta, photons, that demonstrate particle-like properties while collectively behaving like a wave. The hypothesis, an important step in development of quantum theory, was arrived at through Einstein's examination of photoelectric effect, a phenomena in which some solid emit electrically charged particles when struck by light. This work would later earn him the 1921 famous Nobel Prize in Physics. In the second paper, he devised a new method of counting and determining the size of atoms and molecules in a given space. And in third paper, he offered a mathematical explanation of the constant erratic movement of particles suspended in a fluid known as Brownian motion. These papers provided indisputable evidence of the existence of atoms, which at the time was still disputed by few scientists. Einstein's fourth groundbreaking scientific work of 1905 addressed what he termed his special theory of relativity. He described in special relativity the time and the space are not absolute, but relative to motion of the observer. What it meant was the two observers traveling at the great speed in regard of each other would not necessarily observe simultaneous events in time at the same moment, nor necessarily agree in their measurements of space. In Einstein's theory, the speed of light, which is the limiting speed of any body having mass, is constant in all frames of reference. In the fifth paper that year, an exploration of the mathematics of special relativity, Einstein announced that mass and energy were equivalent and could be calculated with an equation, the most famous equation, E is equal to mc square. Although the public was not quick to embrace his revolutionary science in the beginning, Einstein was welcomed into circle of Europe's most eminent physicists and given professorship in Zurich, Prague, and Berlin. In 1916, he published the foundation of the general theory of relativity, which proposed that gravity as well as motion can affect the intervals of time and space. According to Einstein, gravitation is not a force, as Isaac Newton had argued, but a curved space in the space-time continuum created by a presence of mass. An object of very large gravitational mass, such as the Sun, would therefore appear to warp space and time around it, which could be demonstrated by observing starlight as it skirted the Sun on its way to Earth. In 1919, astronomers studying a solar eclipse verified predictions Einstein made in the general theory of relativity, and he became an overnight celebrity. Later, other predictions of general relativity, such as shift in orbit of the planet Mercury and the probable existence of black holes, were confirmed by scientists as well. During the next decade, Einstein made continued contributions to quantum theory and began work on a unified field theory, which he hoped would encompass quantum mechanics and his own relativity theory as a grand explanation of the working of the universe. But there were other things in Einstein's life at the time which were influencing his decisions. As a world-renowned public figure, he became increasingly political, taking up the cause of Zionism and speaking out against militarism and rearmament in his native Germany. This made him an unpopular figure. After Nazi's leader Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933, Einstein renounced his German citizenship and left the country. He later settled in the United States, where he accepted a post at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton, New Jersey. He would remain there for the rest of his life, working on his unified field theory and relaxing by sailing on a local lake and playing his violin. He became an American citizen in 1940. In 1939, despite his lifelong pacifist beliefs, he agreed to write then President Franklin D. Roosevelt on behalf of a group of scientists who were concerned with American inaction in the field of atomic weapons research. Like the other scientists, he feared sole German possession of such a weapon. However, he took part in the subsequent Manhattan Project, but later deplored the use of atomic bomb against Japan in World War II. After the war, he called for the establishment of a world government that would control nuclear technology and prevent future armed conflicts such as this. He published his unified field theory, which was criticized as a failure. Albert Einstein, one of the most creative minds in human history, died in Princeton in 1955. So that was the story of this one of the greatest scientists of all times, Albert Einstein. I hope you liked this video. Thank you for watching.